How's it going, everybody? James, you can also call me Striper here. So, have you ever wondered how a boat actually floats? Well, there's a lot of forces at play when we talk about a boat floating or sailing on the water. When we think of the word force, most people, including myself, the first force that we think about is gravity. And gravity is at play. If we have a boat sailing on the water, and it's sailing along, there is gravity holding us down. It's holding the boat in the water. It's keeping the boat down because it's trying to pull the boat towards Earth. But there's another force at play, which is the reason that the boat just doesn't sink to the bottom. That force is called buoyancy. I like to think and remember the word buoy, which buoys float on the top of the water. So I remember buoy and then buoyancy. So buoyancy is the force acting on either a whole or a partially submerged object, and it wants to push the object up. So gravity's trying to hold it down, buoyancy is trying to hold it up. There's a bunch of other forces at play too, but those are the two main ones, and they balance each other out, and it helps the boat to float. Now, see, there are many different types of buoyancy, and Sassy's actually going to take a look at those with you guys right now.
Thanks, Striper. As we just learned, buoyancy is the force that's pushing up on a boat when gravity wants to pull it down towards the bottom of the seafloor. What we're going to be talking about next is 3 different forms of buoyancy. We have positive buoyancy, negative buoyancy, and neutral buoyancy. So the first one we're going to look at is positive buoyancy. You can think of positive buoyancy as something that floats. So if you were out in your pool and you're floating, you're feeling positive, soaking in those sun rays. Positive buoyancy means you're gonna float. So, things that you can try at home, use different objects that you find laying around. So, some cutlery, a straw. I've got a golf ball here. I'm wondering if that's gonna float. Food can for my cats, other types of objects. You can really try this with anything. Make sure that you're asking a parent or guardian first if you can use what you're going to practice with. So first, positive buoyancy, anything that's going to float. My straw's floating. Some types of plastic are going to float. They're going to be positively buoyant even when you try to fill them up. But some are going to sink, like this plastic fork. So, what do we call it when something is sinking? If it's not positive, it's got to be negative buoyancy, right? So the second type of buoyancy we have, number 2, is negative buoyancy. So that's anything that's going to sink. Pretend you threw your shoe in the pool or you lost it by accident and it sinks. You're not going to feel great about that. It's going to be a negative feeling. So negative means sinking. Negative buoyancy, sinking. So I have a couple other items we're going to try out. Metal straw. Is it going to sink or is it going to float? Definitely sinks. That is definitely an example of negative buoyancy. What do you think about this tin can? Sink or float? Negative or positive? It's a negative buoyancy. Thoughts about this golf ball? Right to the bottom. I also found this Band-Aid case. No Band-Aids in it. I wonder what that's gonna do. It's definitely gonna float. So that's a positive buoyancy. Now is where we're getting to a tricky thing called neutral buoyancy. So neutral buoyancy is when an object gets stuck in the middle of sinking and floating, so between negative and positive buoyancy. This is where it gets tricky. We don't know of many things that have a neutral buoyancy. So if I were to take this plastic recyclable water bottle and put it in, it's gonna float. It's floating on the top. But what happens if I fill up this plastic water bottle with water? What do you think will happen? Full of water? There's a little air in there still, but if I fill it all the way with water, my bottle's going to sink. So a fun experiment for you guys to try at home. Try to get something to be neutrally buoyant. I've taken a second water bottle. I filled it with mostly water. There's some air bubbles in the top. I've put in some rocks. Now, I have not gotten this to work yet, but I've gotten pretty close to getting my water bottle to be neutrally buoyant. So, if I put my water bottle in this tank, and I can move the air bubbles around just right. Almost neutrally buoyant. So, really fun activity to try at home. Gather some materials, figure out which one's going to be positively buoyant, floating, negatively buoyant, sinking, or neutrally buoyant, and stuck in the middle. You can also call it flinking.